So I'm Andrea. I look after the words on the Nourish website, and I'm talking to Jane here today. And Jane's going to be answering some of the amazing questions we've had on our new Nourish community Facebook group. So, hi.
Hi. This is the first. It's great.
So, Debbie has asked, I'd love to know how to keep my bones strong during an early menopause.
So, Debbie's definitely right to start looking at the bones, because we know the hormonal changes just get our bones to lose more of its structure. So the two nutrients she needs to look at when you're looking at bones are calcium and vitamin D. Mm-hmm. So calcium we classically find within dairy products, so butter, cream, cheese, yogurt. You can either go for the full fat versions or skimmed versions. The lower fat versions actually just have as much calcium, so that can be a good way if you're not wanting to have too much of the full fat version. And then you've got things like your small boned fish like sardines, mackerel, anchovies. Sardines on toast, the tinned ones, can be a gorgeous way of getting some calcium. Then you've got things like hummus, because chickpeas contain calcium. And then your dark green leafy vegetables like your spinach, cavallonero, curly kales, that side, they contain calcium, but they contain a substance called oxalate, which means that we don't absorb as much of the calcium from those green leaves. So I wouldn't rely on the green leaves as being my primary source of calcium. I just use them as a good way of getting some additional greens and some additional calcium. And then vitamin D. Now, even though you get vitamin D in eggs, different oils, actually the way that our body metabolizes vitamin D most efficiently is through our skin. But obviously we need to watch our skin that we don't get too much exposure. So this is really where a good vitamin D supplement can be a good way of protecting your bones.
Okay, thank you. So Terry has an interesting question. She says she's just had her regular blood test done, and she's been told that her liver shows high levels of protein. She says she tries to eat protein with each meal, but not a lot. So she was shocked to be told she must be eating too much. Can you help?
So I think this is a real classic case where we mustn't jump on one result. And so too much protein in the liver, we need to know why she's got too much protein in her blood and her liver results. So I'd say go back to your GP and say, let's get a diagnosis, let's get a reason for why there's too much protein before we then start cutting down on protein in the body, because we don't want to cut down on protein in our diets, because we need it for our immune system, for all sorts of essential functions within the body. So let's get a diagnosis before we start cutting down on protein.
Yeah. Okay. So Kay runs a support group for people living with cancer, and she's got two questions. So the first is, what can you do about making sure you're eating when you're feeling nauseous?
It's a classic problem when you're going through cancer treatment. I think understanding why this happens in the body can be quite reassuring, because when you're going through cancer treatment, the cancer treatments attack rapidly dividing cells, because that's generally a cancer cell. But unfortunately in our bodies we also have areas that we also have a lot of rapidly dividing cells, like our stomach and our digestive system. Right. So it's a real pain in the butt, because when you're really wanting to nourish yourself, your body's going, but I'm struggling, I'm feeling sick. So I'd say the first place to start is to not to overface yourself or someone you're looking after with who's having the nausea problem, because overlooking sort of a large plate of something can just completely put you off. So I'd say have small amounts of something, have little nibbles, perhaps when you're watching television or you've got friends around, because it's often just getting off the starting block and having a little bit of something that will help to get the body to realise it needs to eat. Okay. Smell is a real problem when you have nausea, so I'd say just don't go for something that's strong smell, like a strong smelling fish or something like that. Just keep smell away from the food that you're eating as much as possible. And then the classic therapy is ginger. So that could be ginger tea or ginger ale, and actually you can get a gorgeous ginger and rhubarb drink. Just having a small glass can be a good way of just helping ginger be that traditional remedy. Possibly even having a tub of ginger biscuits at the side of your bed, so that when you wake in the morning, which can be a classic time, just have a nibble of the ginger biscuit before you even start to get going.
I did that when I was pregnant.
Yeah, it's a classic. Yeah, it really works.
Now, Kay's other question was about swallowing and how some cancer treatments can perhaps make swallowing difficult or make your mouth sore. How can you cope with that?
So swallowing, one of the mistakes that we classically make is that we think if we're having a problem swallowing, we make something really thin. to swallow something really thin is really difficult. So actually having something like a thicker liquid, so like a smoothie that's not too citrusy, can be easier to swallow than a water-based drink. Also, extremes in temperature can make it really difficult to swallow, so that something that's too hot or too cold, so you might think, well, a swallowing or a sore mouth, having an ice cream, yes, that can be quite useful sometimes, but if it's really red raw, putting an ice cube on a red raw wound on your hand, it's just really hurt. So just letting an ice cream just come back to a bit more room temperature, possibly just putting a warm sauce on it just to have that combination, that can be easier to swallow. Obviously not something that's brittle, that's the worst thing. So something like a soft sourdough bread versus a toast. But I just say look at the thickness and play with the texture of something. And with the sore throat, just watch the temperature so it's not extreme cold or extreme hot.
Great. Naomi has said, she's got a question which I think many of us will relate to. She says, I'd be interested in ideas on how to make good choices when you're just exhausted. Sometimes I know what I should be eating, but it just feels like so much effort and I end up in a vicious cycle of easy, refined carbs.
Yeah, we know what that one's like. I think the classic strategy to try and put in place is to try and have a few things that are protein rich in your fridge. So that's eggs, chicken, fish of all sorts, or it could be tin fish in the cupboard, it could be smoked salmon, it could be some yogurt that has some protein in, or hummus, because if you can have something that's really easy to eat, that's protein rich, the protein satiates you and it also maintains your blood sugar level. Because what you get into with a classic carb fix is that you get that more of a sort of a sugar load type feeling, you get that horrible crash. Two things I've found really useful, I would do one, and I call it the girls' supper when I'm on my own, would be to take some frozen vegetables like peas, broad beans, spinach, steam them or just bang them in a microwave for a couple of minutes, drizzle them with olive oil, a dollop of hummus, which is protein rich, and you get fantastic ready-made hummuses, and then just do some sliced tomato, meal in a bowl, made in 5 minutes. It's gorgeous. The other one would be baked eggs. So literally just crack a couple of eggs into a ramekin, pop it in the oven for about 10 minutes, and that's 10 minutes and it's gorgeous. And you can mushrooms, different greens, and they're two protein fixes that will satiate you and not get you into that horrible sort of crash scenario.
Brilliant, thank you. All right, so Sally has asked about what you think about the nutritional values of delivered meals and the effects of ultra-processed foods in early stages of frailty. I think she's having meals delivered for family.
I think that the problem with a lot of ultra-processed foods is that the processing destroys a lot of the vitamins and minerals within food, so that you lose heat and time-sensitive vitamins and minerals like vitamin C. I think the best area to start to look is actually your freezer. So getting frozen ready meals or things that your parent can store in the freezer, like fish portions, because people think, oh, frozen isn't very good, but actually freezing just actually preserves a lot of the nutrients within the food, because something when it's legally frozen that you bought from a supermarket means that they have to have abided by certain time frames.
So it's frozen really quickly.
Really quickly, and it means that then if you've got a frozen fish portion that can be popped into a microwave, and actually microwaves are completely fine for you. They don't involve radiation, they just tickle the water molecules within a food, so they're completely safe as long as you just use them, as most things, as the manufacturers recommend. So I'd say frozen would be the area I'd really go to look, because you're actually getting the maximum nourishment in something that's really easy to manage when you're looking after someone.
So thank you, Jane. I think that's been really good, and I hope everyone's enjoyed Jane's answers.
And I'd love it if you could just post any questions that you have either in our Facebook community or sign up to the newsletter, where really the newsletter is you're joining our club of people who hear about the news and what we've been up to, and also our lovely recipes before anyone else. So just sign up to the newsletter or just ask questions on the website.
Yep, brilliant. Thank you.